Why were airships banned? How airships were stolen from humanity. Have you ever wondered why, for nearly a century now, our skies, so familiarly crisscrossed by the contrails of jetliners, have remained empty of those majestic, impossibly vast giants gliding smoothly through the clouds like silver whales in an endless celestial ocean? After all, they were once more than just a symbol of progress. They were a reality promising a golden age of air travel. Until suddenly, it all came to an abrupt halt, as if someone had flipped a switch, leaving behind only vague explanations and the now iconic photographs of the Hindenburg disaster, images so deeply ingrained in our collective memory that they become a kind of official seal stamped upon the tomb of an entire era. But what if that seal was forged? And the real reason for the disappearance of airships lies not in a grim crash statistics log or supposedly insurmountable technical difficulties, but in something far darker, far more tangled, and far more profitable for a very, very select few. The official version tells us that hydrogen used to lift these airborne palaces was simply too dangerous, and that the 1937 Lakehurst catastrophe buried public trust forever. Yet, as we'll soon see, this dramatic climax was carefully staged and exploited as the perfect pretext to divert the world's attention from much deeper systemic forces that truly transformed the sky, once proclaimed a free element for all, into tightly controlled, highly lucrative airspace. Imagine choosing, deliberately, a transport system where every ton carried aboard an aircraft demands an equivalent ton of kerosene, creating dependence on oil resources and technologies whose development moved not toward sustainability and autonomy, but toward increasing complexity, requiring massive infrastructures of airports, air traffic control networks, and oil refining behemoths, all hidden behind a single vivid, terrifying flash against an American sunset. A flash that convinced humanity the dream of quiet, graceful, enormous skyships was inherently doomed, when in fact that dream was murdered, snuffed out in the very instant the explosion rang out. A blast that perhaps should have sounded differently, or not at all, because airships didn't vanish due to failure. They were forcibly displaced, their development sabotaged, their potential, especially military and geopolitical, so threatening to the existing balance of power that their elimination became not a matter of engineering, but of high-level politics. Before we dive into the shadowy corridors of this alternative narrative, let's first set aside all stereotypes and return to the very beginning, to the time when the sky was genuinely a new, uncharted continent, and the first bold explorers, like Columbuses of the air, set out aboard fragile vessels filled with gas believed to be the magical key to overcoming gravity. The idea of a steerable airship haunted visionaries long before Count Ferdinand von Zeppelin gave it form in a metal frame draped in fabric. And even earlier, decades before his birth, in 1880, the Russian scientist Konstantin Eduardovich Tsiolkovsky, the very man who would later unlock the door to space, in his article A Controllable Metallic Airship, already described a concept for an airship built from aluminum alloys, impervious to wind, and capable of carrying enormous loads. His prophetic vision was so far ahead of its time that contemporaries dismissed his ideas as madness. Most astonishingly, his calculations diverged fundamentally from the path later taken by the Germans and Americans, because Tsiolkovsky intuitively grasped one of the core physical obstacles facing aerial engineering, the famous square-cube law, a principle seemingly a curse for airships, but in reality, as we'd learn much later, their greatest advantage. For airplanes and other aerodynamic machines, this law strictly limits size. Weight grows with the cube of linear dimensions, while wing lift area only with the square. But for craft relying on aerostatic lift, displacing air, the situation is entirely different. Lift increases with volume, i.e. the cube of size, while the envelope's weight, roughly, increases with its surface area, the square. This leads to one fundamental, astonishing consequence. The larger the airship, the more efficient it becomes, the more cargo it can carry per unit of energy expended, and the more economically viable its operation. In theory, this law allowed for building airborne vessels not hundreds but thousands of meters long, true giants capable of transporting entire freight trains or assembling massive engineering projects mid-air, such as hydroelectric dams or telecommunications satellites, without needing powerful rockets or expensive launch pads. They'd simply ascend to altitude and in the calm stratosphere get to work. This vision, this possibility of creating a truly scalable, sustainable transport system for the future was so immense and simultaneously so threatening to already established industrial sectors that it had to be stopped, not gradually, not through competition, but instantly, through shock, through collective trauma. And that trauma was precisely what the Hindenburg disaster provided. An act less a tragic accident than a meticulously planned sabotage, possibly not motivated by hatred of the Nazi regime, as some conspiracy theories suggest, but by far more pragmatic, cynical calculations. The desire to preserve monopoly over air transport for technologies dependent on oil and complex ground support. The official account of what happened on May 6, 1937 is familiar to everyone. The Hindenburg, the greatest man-made flying machine of its time, 245 meters long, with a volume of 200,000 cubic meters filled with hydrogen, approached the Lakehurst airfield in the United States after its transatlantic flight and in just 34 seconds turned into a churning sea of fire, claiming 36 lives. The culprit was declared to be a static spark igniting a hydrogen leak from one gas cell. But let's ask a simple question. Why among the hundreds of flights made by hydrogen airships before that moment, including numerous military missions during World War I, when Zeppelins endured direct artillery and machine gun fire, did nothing remotely comparable occur in scale or speed of fire? Even under direct shell hits, airships usually just lost buoyancy and descended slowly, and if fire did break out, it spread relatively gradually, giving crews a chance to escape. Only in the Hindenburg case do we witness near instantaneous total annihilation, as if someone had ignited not a cloud of hydrogen, but a barrel of high-octane fuel. Here enters one of the most persistent conspiracy theories, unexpectedly bolstered by some researchers. What if the airship's outer skin wasn't merely coated with ultraviolet protective lacquer, but impregnated with a pyrophoric compound similar to those used in incendiary bombs of the era? A substance that, under certain conditions, that is, contact with oxygen and static electricity, could self-ignite. In that case, the entire airship would become a giant incendiary device, with hydrogen acting not as the initial ignition source, but merely as fuel for a fire already raging in the envelope itself. This theory, dismissed for decades as fringe, logically explains the phenomenal effect witnessed worldwide: lightning-fast, almost explosive combustion engulfing the entire structure in seconds. And if true, this was no accident. It was sabotage, likely carried out during manufacturing or a prior stopover, aimed not just at destroying one airship, but at destroying the very idea of airship travel, by erecting an insurmountable psychological barrier, a deep-seated fear passed down generations, rendering any investment in the field politically and financially toxic. After all, no investor would pour billions into a project forever associated with one of history's most terrifying industrial disasters. This artificially generated and long-sustained fear allowed us to easily ignore all other arguments used to justify abandoning airships, arguments that, upon closer inspection, prove just as dubious as the disaster itself. We're told airships are too slow, cruising at about 150 kilometers an hour. Slower than jets, certainly, but is that a drawback when hauling non-urgent cargo? Or when passenger comfort and panoramic views take precedence? Travel by airship isn't about racing from point A to point B. It is the journey, a unique experience unmatched by any other mode of transport. Moreover, for delivering super heavy or oversized cargo to remote regions, say the Arctic or deep taiga, speed matters far less than infrastructure independence. A modern cargo airship can land almost anywhere, needing no runway or terminal. Just touch down and unload, whether it's an oil platform, module, or hydroelectric equipment, right onto a prepared site. Today, as we know, Russia and other nations are already developing airships with payload capacities from 30 to 200 tons for precisely these tasks, and they use helium, an inert and perfectly safe gas. The issue with helium was never technical, it was always political. In the 1930s, the United States, holding a monopoly on helium extraction, simply refused to sell it to Nazi Germany, forcing the latter to rely on hydrogen and thus predestining its airships to higher risk. This isn't economics, it's raw geopolitics, and it also explains why, even after the war, when helium became more accessible, airships never re-emerged as mass transport. By then, a new paradigm had solidified, a new coordinate system dominated not by engineers and inventors, but by oil barons and aviation fuel producers, players who had zero incentive to allow a transport mode capable of running on solar power or minimal diesel, while hauling tens of times more cargo than the largest aircraft of its day. Now let's address the crucial issue, the one never officially discussed yet fueling the most persistent rumors and legends, the military potential of airships. Unlike airplanes, which must constantly move to stay aloft, airships can hover in one spot for weeks or even months. They can carry massive antennas and radar arrays, creating continuous surveillance coverage over oceans or continents, serve as airborne command posts or mobile hubs for drones. In fact, they're still used this way today, albeit in very limited numbers, for tasks like maritime border patrol. But what if their true scale of deployment remains so deeply classified that even declassified archives contain no trace? History offers many examples of military technologies presumed abandoned, yet secretly advanced in hidden labs and test ranges, and airships are no exception. During and immediately after WW2, both the Soviet Union and the United States pursued hybrid aircraft, combining airship and airplane traits. In the 1950s and 60s, at the height of the Cold War, when espionage and reconnaissance became decisive, ideas of silent, long-endurance platforms were so compelling that such projects were almost certainly classified top secret and funded outside regular military budgets. Many researchers link strange sky phenomena reported then, enormous, silent objects hovering over cities for hours, to possible tests of these clandestine aerial vessels. Even today, in the 21st century, as the world re-enters an era of intense military technical rivalry, the idea of airships returning as strategic platforms isn't so far-fetched, especially with new composite materials like Kevlar, invented by DuPont in 1964 and its analogs, enabling incredibly strong yet lightweight envelopes resistant to extreme pressure and temperature shifts. Add modern navigation, control, and communication systems, and you get a craft surpassing anything previously built. So why don't we see them? Why do projects remain on paper or as mock-ups? Perhaps the answer lies not in technical impossibility, but in the fact that such vehicles, unlike satellites or spy planes, resist full centralized control. They can be autonomous. They can belong not just to states, but to private firms or even individual regions. They threaten the established hierarchy, a system where power stems from control over oil, gas, and ground infrastructure, not from technologies that could render humanity truly free, independent of geographic and political borders. And so we arrive at the most profound, most intriguing aspect of this entire story. The notion that the ban on airships wasn't a ban on technology, but a ban on a certain kind of future. A societal model where transport isn't a source of perpetual cost and dependence, but part of the environment itself, a tool for harmonious planetary development rather than ruthless resource extraction. Airships, especially solar-powered ones, can fly with virtually no fuel, emit minimal noise, and leave no combustion byproducts. They're ideal for climate monitoring, delivering aid to disaster zones, or scientific expeditions to Earth's remotest corners, including the Arctic and Antarctica, where their independence from landing strips is decisive. Here, we cannot ignore the persistent rumors and conspiracy theories surrounding Antarctica in the mid-20th century. Secret German bases, American expeditions like Operation Highjump, officially for reconnaissance, but allegedly aimed at locating and destroying precisely those technologies capable of reshifting global power balances. Though direct evidence is lacking, the endurance and recurrence of these stories suggest a kernel of truth, a common thread linking the Hindenburg disaster, the shutdown of the Soviet airship program after the Oso Aviakim-1 crash in 1937, and the post-war freezing of all major Western projects. That thread is fear of freedom, fear of a technology that cannot be mass-produced as disposable consumer goods, a technology demanding century-scale thinking, not quarterly investor reports. And that fear may still hold us to the ground, making us gaze skyward with longing for a lost dream, for the silver whales that once glided among the clouds, promising us a different path. But friends, this story doesn't end in defeat. It's simply turning a new page. Today, nearly a century after that fateful night in Lakehurst, we're hearing more and more signals that airships are returning, not as museum relics, but as cutting-edge engineering solutions to our most pressing modern challenges. Companies worldwide are investing hundreds of millions into next-generation hybrid air vehicles, combining helium lift with aerodynamic wing lift for greater speed and maneuverability. Concrete plans already exist for commercial passenger routes and cargo corridors, especially in regions where traditional infrastructure is absent or prohibitively expensive. This is no longer fantasy, it's a reality slowly, inexorably becoming part of our future. And our task, as lovers of mystery and the unexplained, is not merely to observe, but to actively participate, to ask uncomfortable questions, dig through forgotten archives, analyze old photographs and eyewitness accounts. Only through collective curiosity and a relentless pursuit of truth can we one day uncover what truly happened on May 6, 1937, and whether we were deliberately misled into abandoning one of humanity's most beautiful, most promising inventions. Every new story you share with a friend, every document you unearth in an old journal or online, every thought challenging established beliefs, each is a small step toward returning not just airships to our skies, but that same boldness to dream, that same belief that the future can be different, brighter, quieter, more majestic. And so, in closing, I leave you with a simple question. What if airships weren't destroyed, but merely hidden, waiting for their moment to return, when the world is truly ready for them? And perhaps that moment is already here. All we need to do is look up and hope to see not a jet contrail, but the smooth, stately silhouette of a returning giant. After all, history, as we know, has no room for the subjunctive mood. It's written by those unafraid to step into it.